Alrighty, what is going on YouTube? It is your boy GZTV. We are here with another 2025 movie review. Just an announcement, Euphoria is coming out in early April or like mid-April. So from like late March to early April, I'll be spending an episode a day watching that. So content slows down. I just wanted to throw that out there. But we're here to talk about the 2025 film Eternity. You see Miles Teller, you see Elizabeth Olsen, you see Callum Turner. So there you have it. I want to say this right away. I'm not against romance movies. I actually like the idea of romance in film, because love is obviously one of the most powerful things people experience. It's a very real world thing. It's what drives so many stories, and honestly, it's what makes the world go round. So I'm very appreciative of romance. I'm very appreciative of movies that cover romance, but personally, as a movie fan, I usually need stakes. So usually romance movies turn me off a little bit. Something has to happen. There has to be some crazy twists, some philosophical dilemma, something that shakes the characters or the audience a little bit. If a movie is just lovey-dovey the entire time, that's usually where I start to lose interest, and that's why Eternity actually worked for me, and we're about to get into everything, all the little details here in a second, because this isn't just a romance movie. It's a romance with a concept behind it. There's kind of a nuance. There's kind of a kick to it. It's not just, oh, we're falling in love and like, oh, some tragedies happen. You throw in the afterlife, moral dilemmas, existential questions about eternity, and suddenly the story becomes way more interesting than a typical love story, and it explores the concept of eternity, as the title suggests. So getting into the premise, on the surface, like, you would think this is pretty simple, but honestly, the concept is very clever. I really like what they did with this. Elizabeth Olsen's character is Joan, who dies and wakes up in this version of the afterlife where everyone has a short amount of time to decide what eternity they want. Now, obviously, Miles Teller's character is Larry, who is her husband before she died. He dies first, and then, like, he eventually, like, finds her, and they meet up and stuff. They have to decide what eternity they want, or else they're kind of stuck in this commonplace forever. There is a massive twist. Joan has to choose who she wants to spend eternity with, because throughout her lifetime she had two husbands. Miles Teller's character, the man she spent most of her life with, or Luke, played by Callum Turner, her first love, who died young in the war, in the Korean War, has basically been waiting for her in the afterlife all this time. I think it was 67 years. Wow, this movie knows ball, don't they? So right away the movie throws you into this brutal, emotional decision, this dilemma. Do you choose the person you shared a lot of your life with, or the person who represents the life that never got to happen? Do you want to live out what could have been, or do you want to continue to live out what you already did? That question alone is enough to carry the film, and that is what gets it going, because there genuinely isn't a correct answer. There's not a correct choice for her here. Both choices make sense, both choices hurt the other, and that tension is what drives the entire story. So we'll get into why it works, why it doesn't, what I'm mid on, and we'll get into a review. So starting with the good, the biggest strength of this movie is the concept. I love concept-driven movies. I like character-driven movies, and when you combine those, the movie works out pretty well. Exploring the afterlife through a romantic dilemma, like who do you want to spend the rest of your life with, both figuratively and literally, is a really interesting way to approach something people have wondered about forever. You know, obviously there's been a lot of philosophical discussions, there's been scientific discussions, religious discussions on what happens after you die. This movie takes a more grounded, almost utopian version of the afterlife to kind of fit the themes more of a movie, and I'm very appreciative of that. I really enjoy that. Obviously I'm not the biggest fantasy fan. When you use it to kind of talk about real world issues and you like relationships and like you do an effective job at it, I can applaud you for it. Instead of some grand heaven or hell, some glorified thing, it feels more like a shared space where souls are trying to figure out what eternity should look like for them, what they're interested in, like kind of based on their past life. There's a common area kind of where everyone hangs out, and then there are different eternities people can choose from. You have these different booths and like the way that's marketed. Do you want to go to Paris? Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to live the rest of your life in a cabin in the woods? What do you want to do? That world building is simple, but it is definitely effective. They definitely don't put too much of the budget into it, but it is pretty awesome. Another thing that works really well is the casting. I think this movie is very well cast. I think the performers are pretty damn good in this one. Miles Teller is great here. I've loved him for a very long time. I can't think of any other huge movies he's done besides Whiplash, but there's certainly some of them I can't think of on the top of my head. Miles Teller, still like a somewhat young guy. He still has a ways to go, and this is another really good movie kind of for his repertoire. I've really enjoyed some of the stuff he's done. He's one of those actors that Hollywood tends to use really well when he's in the right role. He's not one of those guys that just gets thrown in the limelight, forced on us like a Pedro Pascal or a Sydney Sweeney for the females. Elizabeth Olsen, obviously, I know from the Marvel stuff, we watched all those movies we watched with Scarlet Witch. I enjoyed her in those. And while I wouldn't say she is the most captivating actress in Hollywood, she's still very good here. Obviously, she was from Full House, so she's a pretty big part of my like sitcom childhood viewing experience. And obviously, she's incredibly likable on screen. She's a very nice gal. She knows how to play a role. Callum Turner Turner as Luke also works really well. He looks like a classic movie star. Like, he looks perfect for a movie like this. Just the gradient of it, just the vibe of it, just the aesthetic of it. He looks perfect for this. The kind of guy who could have been in a movie like Top Gun or Forrest Gump back in the day, you know what I mean? And the movie actually plays along with that. Like, he's just this perfect, beautiful human being. Luke feels almost like the perfect romantic guy. He feels like the ladies' man, you know? And then the movie reveals that even he isn't perfect. Obviously, there's a little, like, nuances about his character that don't really fucking matter. The dynamic there, this whole love triangle, it's way more interesting. You know, there's no correct answer. I really enjoy how they kind of take what we saw out of Stranger Things with, like, Steve Harrington and Jonathan Byers and make it a little more grounded, make it a little less forced, and they make it more appropriate for the story they're telling. So I guess that's kind of a comparison I would draw. This isn't going to be a long video, by the way. I'm just throwing stuff out there. So getting into the bad now, even though I like the movie overall, there are definitely some issues. I think the biggest issue, the biggest bad about this movie is just how it is paced. I think it's like an hour, 50 minutes long, and in the middle, there's just a big ass drag. Kind of like the competition, kind of how far these guys are going, and they're talking to these ACs and stuff. There's a lot of cool concepts with like the AC and how their romance worked out in the end. We'll get to that maybe in a second, but by the time you reach the final act, you kind of start thinking, all right, like, let's get to the point. You know, we know originally she chooses nobody. She wants to go off to her friend and spend eternity in Paris, but it's a romance story. Like, she's gonna come around and go to either Larry or Luke, and how it ended's pretty expected. But it's definitely noticeable. Like, this isn't terrible how it drags, but it's noticeable. Another thing that felt a little strange, she makes her final decision very abrupt. That's kind of a part of the pacing. Like, I didn't really like how she made her decision. She was like, oh, yep, nobody, neither of you. And it's an interesting decision, and it definitely creates some interesting paths that you could go. She says, oh, I choose nobody. I think she did that with like 35 to 40 minutes left in the film. And that's obviously interesting because it creates a whole third act of like fighting for her back, either fighting for her back or tucking in your tail, you know, for these two men. Instead of choosing either of the two men, she initially chooses neither and decides to spend eternity. I like it as a concept. It makes sense emotionally. You know, she is very much an overwhelmed character. You see her, she's like, just get away from me. I need my space. Like, let me have this room for the last couple of days before I have to make my decision. And they're like all sitting down, and it's almost like Jeopardy. Like, they're sitting there fucking waiting on her ass to make a decision, and it's just a high pressure situation. So her to choose neither is obviously appropriate, but the way the decision happens is very sudden. And again, the movie does kind of force the twist on you rather than build naturally towards it. That was just kind of an awkward writing decision I wanted to throw out there. That's kind of all I had for the bad. Again, I kind of want to be concise with this video. There's also some stuff that falls somewhere in the middle. I don't even know if that many people talk about this movie or if it was like critically received now. Obviously, Elizabeth Olsen, Callum Turner, and Miles Teller, that's pretty big time. I don't know who directed it. I don't think he's anything major, but getting into the okay, it's just stuff in the middle. The comedy is okay. It works. I think there's definitely some moments where me and my dad laughed, and speaking of my dad, actually going into this movie, interestingly enough, he was like, you don't watch romances? Do you even know what this movie's about? And I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna watch it because it's a big time hit from 2025. So maybe not critically, but a lot of like people I watch on YouTube talked about it. Cody Leach. It's not laugh out loud funny, just getting into the comedy once again, but it works. Like, there's some subtleties, you know, she's like whispering, like, shut the fuck up to that kid when they're in the woods, and the ACs create amazing humor. Ooh, he's perfect. And like, they're joking, like, oh, you'll get him next time. And when they're talking to Larry about her going with Luke initially, even though Larry like swayed her on the train, like, you need to go back to your original life, they're like, you tried. And he's like, yeah, that's funny. It's more subtle humor though. Like, speaking on that, like, little ironic moments. There's a lot of irony in this movie, which I could have potentially put in the good because I like how ironic this movie is and its concept. I like how satirical it goes. You wouldn't expect even a romance comedy to be satirical and be clever with it, but it is. Awkward situations, small lines, stuff like that. That's really where the comedy is driven from, and I don't mind that at all. Again, the irony of people being completely distraught about dying and then suddenly having to deal with eternity logistics. I love that. The moment where Larry literally dies at the sight of Luke, that is great irony at the beginning when they're showing the old couple. Fun scene, by the way. I loved that. It's just clever. Again, the AC characters, the afterlife coordinators, we can talk about them a little further. They're also just very fun characters. They almost feel like trainers in a boxing ring coaching each side of the love triangle. And obviously, they don't act like that's every character because they're supposed to like coordinate them to like make a decision based on how they lived. They know a little bit about the person's past life and stuff like that. But in this case, it's almost like you're going to get a drink of water and you're sitting there like, yeah, do this, do that. We got to figure out a way to get them here, you know? It is weak spot, especially the big black woman. I don't know who the actress's name is. She's one of the best characters in this movie. I really enjoyed her. Again, that could have been in the good, but I kind of wanted to disperse this review a little bit, so here we are. The twist where the two ACs end up getting together at the end, it's nice. Like, it's wholesome. It doesn't necessarily make sense. I thought the guy was gay at first. Like, he made it seem like he was gay, but I guess it was kind of surprising. It worked. It's fun. It adds comedy and some entertainment to the story. There's definitely more things I could have talked about, just the aesthetics and the concept of all of the stuff and just what you had to think about for your decisions here. Interesting. So getting into my review, just wrapping this thing up overall, I think Eternity is a really interesting movie. It is not absolutely perfect. It's a little slow at times. I will say it definitely drags. And the softness of the romance does limit how intense the story can get to my liking, because I like intense stuff. I like crazy shit to happen. But the concept is strong enough to carry it. Just this idea, this Black Mirror-like concept that we're stuck. You gotta choose what eternity you want. How do you want to live the rest of your life? The film explores grief, love, regret, jealousy, and even toxic relationship dynamics. One of the more interesting revelations is when we find out Larry originally used Joan's grief after Luke's death as a way to work his way into a relationship with her. I like little things like that. Such a toxic but realistic thing people sometimes do. Grief bonding is kind of a term for it. And the movie isn't afraid to show that, isn't afraid to be very realistic to the real world. At the end of the day, the story asks a question that's pretty fascinating. What do you actually do with eternity? Do you chase the fantasy? Do you choose the life you already lived? Or do you choose something completely different? That's a powerful idea. And even if the movie doesn't explore every possible angle of that concept to the fullest extent, it still does enough to make the story compelling. It's not a movie I'll return to all the time, mostly because romance isn't my go-to genre, but it's definitely not an average film. The concept is clever, the performances are strong, and it gives you a lot to think about. And honestly, any movie that makes you sit there afterwards and ask yourself, what would I do in this situation, is doing something right, is a win in my book. It's a decent movie. 7.5 out of 10 is what I'm giving Eternity. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. As always, it has been your boy GZTV giving you guys these movie reviews. This is a pretty short one. This should be out lickety-split tomorrow. I didn't really have much to say about this. It's a pretty simple concept. You can only talk about so much. Go check out the social medias. Have a good rest of your day, night, whenever you are watching this. Be on the lookout for more movies in the future. I don't really know what's up next because I'm kind of scrambling through some more of the 2025 films to get into. So, peace.